This is Bloomfield Center in 2018. Have you ever wondered what this area might have looked like when first settled? What did it look like in 1735, when the parish of Wintonbury was established? Or in 1835, when Bloomfield was incorporated? Wintonbury was created as part of the Windsor settlement when the population of Messenger's Farm, as the original settled area was known, grew larger. Residents found it difficult to travel to the Windsor Church for services, especially in the winter. The Simsbury and Farmington churches were even farther away. Wintonbury was formed of land mostly from Windsor, with smaller sections from Simsbury and Farmington. The name Wintonbury derives from Windsor, Farmington, and Simsbury. The first structure in the parish was, of course, the church, since attending church services was required. The location of the building was to be on the east side of a brook called Wash Brook. The original building, called the Meeting House, was a plain, clapboard building with no steeple or belfry, built during the winter of 1737-38. Hezekiah Bissell was ordained and installed as the first minister in 1738. A house was built for Reverend Bissell in 1750, a short distance south on what is now Bloomfield Avenue. After falling into disrepair, the meeting house was replaced in 1801 by a larger and more elegant structure with a small steeple. This woodcut print from about 1820 shows the church with the Brown and Griffin Tavern on the left and the Hiram Roberts store on the right. This church building was used until 1858, when the present stately structure was built. There was no record of a town common or green until 1826, when Oliver Thrall bought land and donated it to the Wintonbury parish for common use. Over time, the common was crisscrossed with wagon roads and footpaths so often that the exact shape of a turkey track was formed, and until 1888, the village green was known as Turkey Track. That year, Lester Roberts donated $100 to the Bloomfield Village Improvement Association for the formation of the town's first public park, known as Roberts Park. The beautiful red brick Federal-style home facing the green was built in 1822 by his father, Lemuel Roberts, Jr., who fought in the Revolutionary War and is buried in the old Wintonbury Cemetery. The park soon had a trim appearance for the first time in its existence. Circled by a fence and a narrow gravel-paved road, work on the park was completed in 1890. Bloomfield, the new name given to our town, was incorporated as an independent town in 1835, and the center emerged as a typical New England village, with a hotel, tavern, post office, residences, and some industry. In the late 1800s, the town formally established a town green. The size and shape of the green has changed many times over the years. Bloomfield Center is where 5 roads converge from every direction. The earliest building on the northwest corner of Tunxus and Mountain Avenues was built in 1790, although the original use is not known. In 1858, the 2-story building became the previously mentioned Brown and Griffin Tavern, and it became a local gathering stop known for its genial hospitality and good food. A third floor was added and used for dancing and other entertainments. It was also the headquarters for the Hartford to Terriffill stagecoach line. The tavern was destroyed by a fire in 1878. The town hall was built on this site in 1903, and the original Prosser Library was an important part of this structure. The Gab Tobacco Warehouse stood just to the north of the town hall, and it also was destroyed by a raging fire in 1912. The Masonic Hall was built here in 1923 and has now been torn down. In 1947, the Watkins, father and son, took over the service station that was next to the Masonic Hall. The service station has also now been removed. North of the warehouse was the Sidney Colton General Store. In 1863, Sidney and his son Franklin began the manufacture of grain cradles. The building remained a grocery store under subsequent owners and became a First National store in the 1930s. The Taverners owned it in 1940 when it was destroyed by fire, and they replaced it with a modern store. Later, Sinatra's Market occupied the building, and an addition for the original Bloomfield store was attached. Next to it was the Bloomfield Pharmacy of Joe Barnett. Just north of the Congregational Church was the home of Samuel C. Buckingham, who was a shoe cobbler. But his house contained something more important to the history of Bloomfield. He had a library of 300 books, and on alternate Monday nights, men, not women, were allowed to come to borrow books costing from 1 to 25 cents for up to 2 weeks. The property was purchased by the church in 1961, and the house was raised to make room for parking. When the house was torn down, men of the church salvaged planks from the house to make a bench that is in the community room of the library as a memorial to Samuel Buckingham. A bookplate honoring this early librarian can still be found in older Prosser library books. The next house going north was where James Goodwin Batterson was born in 1823. Batterson founded the Travelers Insurance Company and was its first president, and he remained in that position until his death in 1901. As owner of the New England Granite Works, Batterson was also known nationally as a supplier of granite and marble for construction of monuments. Many of the largest Civil War monuments in many cities were built by Batterson. He was the building contractor for the Connecticut State Capitol building. The Tunxus Avenue house was torn down in 1963. Beyond the church is the cemetery, first called the Old North Cemetery, now known as the Old Wintonbury Cemetery, the burial place of many of the original settlers of the town. A stone at the northern end of the cemetery proclaims, "Here lies ye body of Lucy, the daughter of Sergeant Isaac Skinner, who died February 23rd, 1739 and 40, age 18 years. This was the first person buried here." Across the road is Philly Park and Pond. The original 7 acres were donated to the town by Alfred Newberry Philly in 1910. In 1930, a nephew and niece of Philly purchased and donated 2 additional parcels of land. Under the direction of the Bloomfield Village Improvement Association, the pond and park were developed. Since the area had become a dumping area, town residents welcomed the elimination of the eyesore. A new renovation is now underway. On the eastern side of the green was Wintonbury Avenue, that at that time curved around to meet Park Avenue. Herman Rowley built a house here in 1843. The first floor became a village store, first operated by Hiram Roberts. Later, Raymond Ladd and his wife ran the store, and later the added-on post office as well. The post office was moved to Park Avenue in 1945. The old add-on building was then used as a shoe repair shop. The Ladds had a beautiful home on the corner of Park Avenue. The Village Improvement Association devoted considerable effort to get trolley service extended to Bloomfield Center. And it finally happened in 1909. The Methodist Society was formed in 1817, with services being held in the North Middle School on Tunxus Avenue. In the 1830s, a permanent church building, a modest structure, was built on Whirlwind Hill, the site of the present Mountain View Cemetery. The church members became dissatisfied with the location, and the church building was moved to the southeast corner of Bloomfield Avenue and Park Avenue. It was enlarged, and a second story, pillars, and a steeple were added. When the Methodists merged with the Congregational Church to form the Federated Church, their old structure became the parish hall. Methodist property was sold to the town as a site for the new town hall. The Methodists built a new church on School Street. The home of Dr. Henry Gray, a late 19th century physician, was on Mountain Avenue, near the corner of Bloomfield Avenue. Justice Fitch had once a tannery at this location. Going west on Mountain Avenue, across Washbrook, the steam-powered Case and Hamblin Sash and Blind Factory was in business. The Riley Lumber Company started in 1933 and occupied the site until 2017. Across the street is the Hiram Brumsted House, built in 1801. A hugely popular bowling center was built on Mountain Avenue on the present Ocean State Job Lot site. It closed in 1989. Up the hill, a short distance on the left, was the Jonathan Palmer House, built in 1794. Dr. Eugene Bester, well-known physician and an active participant in town affairs, bought the house and 26 acres in 1927 and created beautiful gardens. After the death of Dr. and Mrs. Bester, the town issued a permit allowing the house to be dismantled. It has been reported that it was reconstructed and is standing in a Vermont town. On Wintonbury Avenue, near the Congregational Church, the Academy, a private school, was built in 1854, and it flourished for a few years. But classes had become largely discontinued prior to the purchase of the property by the town for the Center School District in 1873. The building later became the Center District Firehouse. On the northwest corner of Woodland Avenue is the house built by Theodore Cadwell about 1765, but we know it as the Ellsworth House, since it was here that in 1772 Oliver Ellsworth, who later became the third Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, first hung his shingle to practice law. The house and a small farm were given to him by his father when he was admitted to the bar in 1771. He lived here only a short time before moving to Hartford in 1775. He became known as one of the most able lawyers in New England. Around the corner on Woodland Avenue was the first Sacred Heart Church, built in 1878. It was torn down in 1970 after the new church was built on Wintonbury Avenue in 1963. Park Avenue was the main road leading east. It was largely residential, with many large homes of prominent people. The town grew. It became an important business and shopping area. The largest building where Wintonbury Mall now stands was the Whiten Carriage Company. In 1843, Augustus Whiten built a blacksmith shop on Park Avenue, later adding a large woodworking shop for making carriages and wagons. His horse-drawn wagons were known to be of the best workmanship. He specialized in making business wagons, as they were called, for the Adams Express Company, that later became part of the Railway Express Agency. Whiten Carriage was raised in 1930, when the popularity of automobiles lessened the demand for carriages. A little farther east are the railroad tracks. In 1868, the town purchased shares of the Connecticut Western Railroad Company, provided said railroad is built and a station erected within 1/2 mile of Bloomfield Center. Under construction for several years, the Connecticut Western Railroad passed through Bloomfield on its way to Millerton, New York. Passenger and freight stations were built in 1871. Initially, there was a lot of rail traffic, with 8 trains a day each way. But service declined because of insufficient patronage. The passenger station was torn down in 1940, and the freight station was converted to the Farmers Exchange. The Farmers Exchange was formed after World War I by local farmers who recognized the advantage of cooperative purchasing animal feed and equipment at wholesale prices. It was in business into the 21st century. In its later years, it was a popular place to buy flowers and vegetables for planting. Before we leave the Connecticut Western Railroad, we digress to relate a tragedy on the line, perhaps largely forgotten. On January 14, 1878, at about 10 in the evening, a span of the Terriffill Bridge gave way, plunging a Connecticut Western Railroad train into the icy Farmington River 20 feet below. The train included 2 locomotives and 8 passenger cars packed with people. Many of them were returning from a revival meeting in Hartford, where they had heard the popular Protestant evangelist Dwight Moody. The accident happened 1/2 mile west of the Terriffill station. As the first locomotive, having passed over the first half of the bridge, approached the western abutment, the span broke, sending the 2 engines, the baggage car, and 3 of the passenger cars into the river. The accident killed 13 individuals and injured 70. The first Bloomfield High School was built on the south side of Park Avenue in 1930 and used until a new high school was built on Huckleberry Lane in 1956. It was then used for the Board of Education administrative offices. The new police department building was built in 1991 on the site of the old high school. A popular ice cream and sandwich shop with a familiar historical name, A.C. Peterson, opened at the corner of Jerome and Park Avenue. The Rite Aid Pharmacy now occupies the spot. The Baptist Church was erected in 1795 on the northwest corner of Park and Jerome Avenues, where the gas station sits now. Park Avenue developed into a shopping area with many popular shops. This was replaced with the redevelopment of the Wintonbury Mall in the mid-1960s. The entire center of Bloomfield, from Tunxis Avenue on the west to Jerome on the east, and from Park Avenue north to Wintonbury Avenue, was laid flat for the mall. And the mall remains the most prominent architectural feature of Bloomfield Center. A welcome addition to Bloomfield Center was the opening of a movie theater on Jerome Avenue. After it closed, Chuck E. Cheese's occupied the building. And still later, Windsor Federal Savings Bank opened a branch here. When Wintonbury Mall was built, the piece of Wintonbury Avenue on the east side of the green was closed. and that area became a part of the larger green that we have today. 4 war monuments sit on the green, honoring Bloomfield residents who served in World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. But the most prominent structure of the green that has become the symbol of the center is the drummer boy statue commemorating the brown drums of Bloomfield. It was created by Wolfgang Beal and dedicated in 1976 as we celebrated our country's 200th anniversary. In 1913, the Consolidated Center School opened on Jerome Avenue, about where the post office is now located. Over the next few years, all the small, mostly one-room district schools were closed. After World War II, several new grade schools were built and Center School was closed. In 1963, when the old town hall and library building was to be torn down, the books of the library were stored in the vacant Center School until the new library was finished. But on a July morning of that year, a fire destroyed much of the collection. What appeared initially to be a small localized fire quickly spread to engulf much of the buildings. A few books were salvaged, but most were lost to fire and water. The building had to be torn down. The center has evolved over almost 400 years. It began as a wilderness with a single structure, the Meeting House Church. Toward the end of the 1800s, Bloomfield Center became a modern community with electricity, telephones, and passenger rail to Hartford and other points. As the next century rolled in, the civic role of the center solidified with construction of a town hall and library. In 1909, trolley service extended into the center. In this 21st century, we can anticipate continued evolution. But in spite of the many changes, the Congregational Church remains the dominant focus of the center, reminding us of our origin.